Welcome to the Creative Condition podcast, an ongoing series of conversations and considerations to help people understand and embrace their own unique creativity for fulfilling lives and brilliant careers. My name is Ben Tallon. I'm an illustrator and author, and I bring 16 years of creative industry experience working with the New York Times, The Guardian, the Premier League, and more. And I invite designers, artists, psychologists, scientists, coaches, athletes, sensitivity experts, and all kinds of thought leaders to help us broaden our knowledge of creativity. Creativity is a fundamental pillar of human happiness, a vital ingredient in the solutions to our problems, but so often misunderstood. The show is supported by founding sponsor and B Corp, Illustration X. Take a look at their stunning range of illustrators and animators at illustrationx.com. If you like the music for the show, it's by Dirty Freud, who you can listen to now on Spotify and all good music streaming services.
Right, well, the last time I did this, I completely forgot to introduce myself. Marie just did that, but I'm Ben Tallon. I'm an illustrator, author, and host of the Creative Condition podcast. And I met Max at Off Festival this year, and Max gave an amazing talk, which we're going to get into today. But first, I'm going to let Max introduce himself.
Cheers, Ben. Thanks for having me. I'm Max, co-founder of a branding agency called Ragged Edge.
I wanted to start with possibility because it's something that jumped out of your talk, which was called Things Will Never Be the Same Again. Branding in the Age of Convergence. So let's paint us a picture. What's the lay of the land just now, and what was the impetus for your concern and for the talk?
Yeah, I think for me, I've been in this industry quite a while. I've been running Ragged Edge 17 years. And I got into the industry because I felt like branding was this kind of like a magic trick where you could really transform how people thought about different industries, different brands, different products, different services. And the brands that were doing that were creating brands like Monzo or Oatly or whatever it is, were doing things that were just really fundamentally different. That's kind of stopped happening. And I think what we're starting to see, or what we've been starting to see over the last period of time, maybe it's 5 years, is stuff is getting just to feel more and more similar, and we're losing that distinctiveness, we're losing that difference, and we're starting to see this landscape, not just brands, but creativity in general, is feeling like it's flattening, and everything kind of looks the same.
I think that we're being funneled down these very narrow spheres of influence. So, a lot of people might go straight to Pinterest, for example, or Google Images. And we mentioned him this morning, but Sean Thomas from JKR said to me, going back a few years now, he said that, people said, look, it's a long way off before AI, for example, can do this, can do design, can do branding. His concern was that wasn't going to remain the case if we all went to those same places for inspiration and we all followed the trend. And you hit upon something there which is really important, which was magic trick, wonder. These are feelings that I think that most people would agree is why a lot of us want to get into this industry, because I see it as alchemy, what we do. Is that something you always placed great importance on when you started Ragged Edge?
Yeah, I think so. For me, like any creative profession, any creative job is about making a choice, isn't it? We're all chosen to be in this industry. And I think the reason why we choose it is because of that possibility. And we've all got that creativity inside us, and we want to have an opportunity to be paid to express it and to create stuff that's new and different and that we've never done before, and maybe the world's never done before. If you lose that, it becomes a very different industry.
What role as an agency founder do you play in checking that is permitted and working with the right clients that enable that autonomy throughout, that actually cherish what you do as opposed to a transactional relationship?
Yeah, I guess two things there. One is the culture that you create in the agency, and I think what you hit on is bang on, that you have to create a space that encourages ideas and it encourages ideas from everywhere. And like you talk about like psychological safety and people feeling like they can express themselves, people like they feel like they can express an opinion without being told, no, that's wrong or that's stupid. Like that just kills creativity straight away. So you have to try, and we try quite hard. We don't always get it right, but we try really hard to make sure that anyone who's at Ragged Edge has got that confidence, that psychological safety to be able to express an opinion, to come up with an idea, and to not be scared of being wrong. Then, of course, you got the clients, which is the second part. And we got Alex and Steph in the room here today, and a big part of they help bring in the new business. And the main part of their job really is trying to figure out, like, we're lucky enough to have quite a lot of like inbound from clients, lots of inquiries. And so our job becomes like, how do we find the people who've got the right mindset, the right mentality? And that we talk about it as a change maker mindset. But that mindset, like whether it's at Ragged Edge in the team or whether it's the clients, like that is probably the most important thing. Like everything else we can get past, like whatever industry they're in, whatever product it is, it kind of doesn't matter. It's that mentality that's the thing that's going to tell us whether we can work well, whether we can do great creative work.
Yeah, because it transcends the current moment. It transcends breaking even or profit. And don't get me wrong, we live in a capitalist world. That's important. Of course, we've got to bring that to clients, you know?
Yep.
But I'm a big believer that you do that far more if you can bring genuine creativity and humanity and storytelling and original ideas.
And I think one of the things that we've really learned, doing this stuff for a while is like there's every project that we do is not one person's project. It's the product of a whole different set of experiences, different set of skills, different set of perspectives, different set of mindsets. And the magic is bringing that all together.
One of the really interesting parts of your talk that grabbed me was the idea, the importance of the idea, as opposed to starting with an aesthetic. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So I think when you've got a blank page in front of you, the natural thing is to reach for things that already exist, to try and find inspiration in things that already exist. The problem is that way of thinking, you're starting with an aesthetic, what something looks like. And if you're starting from an aesthetic, even if you move that aesthetic forward a little bit, it's still always going to feel derivative. It's always going to feel like something that you've seen before, because all it is an aesthetic. What we've tried to do really, really hard is start from an idea, start from a concept. And so a big part of Ragged Edge is like, don't bring visual references, bring, something different to start with. And it might be a song lyric, it might be a meme, it might be a poem, it could be anything. But it has to have like an idea at the heart, not just a visual aesthetic. And what that means, once you've got something a bit richer, a bit deeper, that's not just like the surface, what that starts to do is it really starts to open up possibility. That's when you start to be able to go in really interesting, different directions, and you remove some of the constraints that you might otherwise have had.
Yeah, because then you've got narrative, and you've got something that enlivens everybody, and that then unlocks something in the psyche where all those lived experiences start to gush and take on new forms. And that's when the technology becomes an enabler, because you're feeding this wonderful tools, impressive stuff with humanity, with something fresh and something felt. You put that stuff into technology, and that's when you've got magic. Yeah. But if you start with the technology and you limit yourself to that interface and that tool, whether that's because it's a comfort zone or whether it's because it's the only thing you can think to do, that's when it's kind of antithetical to creativity.
One bit of advice I always like Sir John Hegarty that always sticks with me is he said, don't walk around with headphones on. And I think that's the same thing, isn't it? And just like be open to the world around you and to absorbing everything.
But it's worth remembering that we're only consciously aware of 5% of what's going on in here. 95%, is going on some other level. So I think that's really that's kind of liberating, because that takes away that paralyzing fear that I think comes with the feeling that I should be doing X, Y, and Z, that I should be remembering that fact, and I should be knowing about that topic. Live your life. Feel the magic in the world around you. And I think your brain kind of does the rest, and it banks it. And I think there's something wonderful about that.
Yeah, you have to free it up, don't you?
Active boredom is really important, because the unconscious is every bit as important as the conscious mind. But if the conscious is constantly clogged up with TikTok nonsense or whatever else it might be, then it ain't going to do that. And that's when you start to burn out or feel unenthused. And that brings us on to social media. And how destructive do you feel that the role of the algorithm is?
Posting something on social media and putting yourself out there is something we all have to do at every stage of our career. It's quite intimidating, and it's also, like, people are, as we all know, quite negative on social media. But I think that the thing with the algorithms that I find quite, almost like, this may be overly dramatic, but quite distressing, is like the incentives around it are all wrong. And what these tech platforms are all, like, they're all promising to be to sort of unlock creativity and to democratize creativity. All these, like, big, vague promises that we can all, like, get excited by and really buy into. But actually what they incentivize is everybody doing the same thing. And you think about TikTok's a great example, right? Like, with its, like, attention algorithm, where actually the way to be successful on TikTok is to jump on a trend with the same soundtrack, doing the same dance moves or whatever it is, or remix of the guy in finance or whatever it is, and even in the same tone of voice, and even, like, if you like there's like a weird, like, TikTok voice, and that's true not just on TikTok. It's true on every social platform. It's true on search engines. So people design search engines now for robots, for SEO. Not for people. Sorry, they design websites for the search engines, for SEO. It's true in everything we see. We talked about coffee shops, didn't we? And, like, how there's this sort of Instagram aesthetic for them. Netflix now, like, everything is created not for humans, but for the algorithm. And so what we're seeing everywhere, and this is not a new observation, but, like, what we're seeing everywhere is just like this flattening of culture, isn't it? And where particularly aesthetics, but kind of everything is starting to look the same, because we are all incentivized to make stuff that looks the same.
What I find great optimism is, and in all of this, is the fact that these conversations are now happening, and they're quite over. I think there's an awareness that's starting to happen now of the place that we're at. Once we become consciously aware and we start to understand the box that we've been put in, I think that is the first step in breaking through that. Do you feel the same?
Yeah, passionately. Where we are now, where we are seeing this, like, flattening of culture, we are seeing the algorithms dictating everything. What, like you say, what that gives you is this huge, huge opportunity. Because if everybody else is doing one thing, like, there's this, it's easy actually to stand out, because all you have to do is something different. And we need to, as creatives, that is our job now, and particularly in the industry that I work, branding, where it's all about distinctiveness. It's all about trying to create something that is unique, different, memorable.
There was a brilliant bit in your talk about agriculture and branding and the origin of. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, I mean, you think about, like, the origin of branding is farmers literally branding their livestock. And why do they do that? They do that to make sure that you can recognize their cows in a field of loads of other people's different cows. So what they are doing is, like, the whole point of branding, back to when, farmers started doing that, was to make their product, service, organization, cow uniquely identifiable. That is the whole point of branding, and it remains so to this day. And I think we've all forgotten that. And I think, like Ragged Edge, we've been, I feel like, throughout my career and throughout the agency, we've been fighting this battle the whole time, where people think that a brand is about trust and it's about credibility, and they think that a brand is about creating something that looks like the thing that people expect. But actually, the point of a brand, that number one table stakes point of a brand, is to be different. Because if you're different, you're uniquely identifiable. If you're different, you're memorable. And if you're memorable, you're much more likely to get chosen.
Different for different sake equally isn't going to work. It's about difference with a story and an idea and an actual empathy and understanding of the brand and listening to the origin story of that brand and first learning the culture of it all and spending time. Do you challenge your clients? Are you willing to challenge something that you feel is less than adequate?
Yeah. I think, getting to know and getting to understand. It's easy to challenge, but I think to be effective at that, you really have to understand their business, their problem, their challenge. And so we will, before we start doing any work, before we start making any decisions or really having any opinions, we will do an immersion process. We have to start from a point of pushing and challenging and pushing people to the edges of what's possible.
You do, that's it. And it's about respect. People come to our companies or us as freelancers for creativity, for spark. And I think that there's a lot of fear in our culture at the moment and anxiety, speaking broadly, speaking political, speaking just out there. And I do think that feeds into decision making as well. So it's up to us to be somewhat renegade and maverick and actually see that coming, but do it in the right way.
I think that's really true. And to just pick up on that, when times are hard, so the economy has been in weird places for the last few years, what you tend to see with clients that gets passed down through to agencies, which gets passed on to the individual people doing the work, is fear. Because people are worried about their, at a company level, they're worried about their bottom line. At a personal level, they're worried about their jobs. And so that inhibits the work. And so in times like we're in at the moment, what you start to see is, and this plays into what we were talking about earlier about this sea of sameness, is you start to see people taking, as an industry, the industry stops taking risks. And you start to see stuff that you can see it in the work. You can see the fear in the work. And I think our job as creative people is to try and create the environment with our clients where we reduce that feeling of fear, we reduce that nervousness, so that we're in a space where we can create that safety that we talked about, that psychological safety to do the things that feel brave, to do the things that are going to push the client, to do the things that feel risky, but are probably actually the smart, sensible thing to do. They're probably the least risky things to do. One of the things that we've tried to evolve, and it's been really interesting, is actually bringing the client into that process. We used to have this fear, I guess, of showing the inner workings of our mind. Like we all know as creatives that sometimes the inner workings of our brains are maybe a bit messy and a bit unusual and maybe quite different to other people. But actually, and so we used to keep that separate from the client, and we used to do that all. It was almost like a black box. But actually what we've learned to do, and this takes confidence and it takes real comfort and a great relationship with the client, is to try and bring the client into that process and to try and open it up. And every time we've done that, it's just we've seen so much benefit from it. Because number one, the clients love to be part of it. They love seeing that process. It helps them understand why we've got to certain decisions, how we've got to certain decisions. And what it helps is it helps create a real sense of shared collaboration and of shared sort of ownership over the work.
I think you're right. I think by bringing the client in and giving them respect of being a part of that thinking, what a great buzz for that client as well. That's probably the highlight of the, well, it might not be, maybe it could be the highlight.
I know, I think you're right. And clients often tell us that the meetings that we have are their favorite meetings of the week or whatever, sometimes ever, because they get to be part of this exciting process. What we've learned, again, and we have had to learn this, is if a client has been part of the creation, they're much more likely to understand the work, they're much more likely to believe in the work. And what that means is that when the branding agency or the creative agency kind of isn't in the room or has finished the project or whatever, the client's going to champion that work still. And that's going to make it much, much more likely that the work lives in real life.
Speaking of work in the real world, the first time I came across your Eager branding for the fruit juice was in Barcelona when we were having a beer, and you showed me it in the fridge and you told me that I wouldn't ever not see it in the fridge of a pub again. And it's been right now. When I walk in, I see it, I tell the friend the story, and it sings. So let's talk about that, because there's an interesting story there with the Tropicana thing and the kind of the story that goes with that.
Yeah, right. So one of the things like I get quite frustrated about in branding generally is people talk with real conviction and certainty about the rules, and very often, like, they aren't real, and these rules are just sort of almost like old wives' tales. They're this stuff that's like been passed down and exaggerated, and often they're just not true. And in the orange juice category, there's this famous example of Tropicana, and Tropicana rebranded, and they basically fundamentally like changed the look of their pack, and it was a complete disaster. And I believe it supposedly cost like $35 million to basically roll it back. It was such a disaster that they had to sort of undo it and replace it with the old packaging. What happened as a consequence of that is I think people drew the wrong conclusions, which is they thought, like the juice category thought, that there were some sort of weird immutable laws of juice where unless an orange juice had a white carton, it had green writing, it had a picture of a delicious-looking orange on the front, unless it had those things, people wouldn't know it was a juice and they wouldn't buy it. You started to see the juice category just all looked absolutely identical. They all look the same. The reason for that is because everyone is really, really scared of being the next Tropicana. And they're like, well, we don't want to be the people that cost my company $35 million by, maybe making the pack orange instead of white, or maybe like having blue writing instead of green, or whatever it is. We looked at that and we were like, well, do you know what? I don't think there is this like weird immutable law of orange juice. And actually, maybe what happened with Tropicana is that maybe they changed the pack and people just didn't recognize Tropicana when they went to buy Tropicana because they made the pack unrecognizable. And so the sales of Tropicana went down. And so back to like the point of branding is designed to make your product feel uniquely recognizable, and the Tropicana rebrand like fucked that up and made it hard to recognize. And so what that did, being able to challenge that rule, that there are no immutable rules of orange juice, that there's no like category code around orange juice, meant that we could make a juice that's here on the left that still is, I hope, obvious it's obvious that's an orange juice. I think if you saw that in a bar or in a supermarket, I think you'd probably guess it was an orange juice, but because it's orange and it says orange on it. But it doesn't look like the rest. And so we could create something like super distinctive that still people were going to know was an orange. There wasn't any danger there. And the reason why we could do that was because we felt comfortable that we could challenge the rules and try and think a little bit differently.
Now that we're having this conversation, and you're having this conversation a lot out there digitally and in real life and everything else, does anything change for you as an agency? Is this now even more at the forefront of your mind, or is this something that you've always held dear to? I mean, the challenging these rules, and actually, does it help to strengthen your resolve in doing that by having these conversations and seeing the responses?
Yeah. It just gives us like so much more conviction, and like it is definitely AI has made it, or is going to make it. It's going to be a force multiplier of mediocrity. It's going to make it really, 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 really easy to make more stuff that looks the same as everything else. And what that does is it means that everyone can have a brand, a visual identity that looks fine, that is fine. AI is going to make that easy to have a brand that looks of a certain level. What that means is that it is going to be harder to make something that stands out. And standing out is going to be even more valuable because there's going to be way more people that are the same. And if you can stand out from that crowd, if you can cut through that crowd, that is going to have a real commercial value now, more almost than ever before, because it's going to be much harder. And I think that should give us all like real, number one, like optimism, hopefully, but also real conviction that we have to really focus in on being able to create stuff that is fundamentally looks, feels, sounds, behaves differently to what's out there at the moment. That is going to be even more valuable in the future.
And I believe that how you start to tap into that as an individual is by drawing on your own nuance, your nuances, your quirks, your story, the things that Joseph Campbell, American writer, who he describes it as following your bliss. It could be the weirdest little thing that you're into. Follow it. Make that sing in your portfolio. I think that every agency leader that I've spoken to in this industry values character and individuality and difference above all else.
Yeah. And now, like, as, students and graduates, like, coming into this industry, like, the bar has been raised in terms of competence, and like, it's easy to make stuff look good. It's much easier now to make, cool mock-ups and things like that, and to make the design look tight. But the one thing still that really stands out, the thing that we look for, is like the weirdness, the excitement. Like, when we see a folio, we see a piece of work that gets us excited, it's not because it's well executed. That's helpful, but that is easier now. The thing that makes it stand out is like the weirdness that comes from that sort of personal expression. That person, that whatever they're a designer, a writer, a creative, whatever it is, who's put themselves out there and done something different. Like, that is so valuable for us. We need that. And it will be so valuable to our clients when that person comes to work with us. So yeah, that's the thing, that difference. That's what gets us excited.
Yeah, and to echo that from a freelance point of view, my breaks into the industry came as a combination of not my knowledge and passion, the things I knew about, the things that I'd expressed with passion and was visibly so, the uniqueness of the style, which was informed by me as a human being, my lived experience, the things I gave a shit about. And just sheer difference, like you said. I remember going to see Roger Browning, who was the design director at The Guardian at the time. Maybe one client under my belt at the time. And the things that he pulled from my portfolio were the most kind of antagonistic, partisan work that I'd created, sometimes just to make my studio mate laugh.
And you can see it, like, in your work now, right? Like, your work has got like a real distinctive point of view. It looks different to anything else out there. It feels like it's come from here rather than here. So it is you. And that's what people are buying, isn't it? Like, that difference, that point of view, that heart overhead.
I always have to remind myself of that voice.
It's arguably harder now, isn't it? Because you want to fall back on your experience, doing things the way you've always done them.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, I'm the same. Like, I have to check myself with that and question everything because it's too easy to take those shortcuts.
I think it's vitally important to read wide, to keep constantly changing your inspiration, looking for sources new, doing things that make you feel a little bit uncomfortable, changing up the people you surround yourself with. I think you constantly have to fertilize the mind to stay current and to stay fresh. And I think you have to course correct as well.
We do a lot. I think as a group of people, we're quite introspective, and we're constantly thinking about what we could have done better, what would work better next time. And I think it's in some ways like it infuriates some of the team because we just constantly want to change everything all the time, and we've got this like quite well-honed process for the projects that we do. Like our branding projects go through a pretty robust process that everybody understands and is clear, and we know how long each bit's going to take, how long each bit's going to cost, how many people need to be working on which bit at which time. And that, like, really, we should probably stick to that. But like the whole time we're questioning it, and we want, like, the creative team are like, well, maybe we could do this bit a bit differently, and maybe we can, move this bit around. And that is really, really important. And I think, were we not to do that, we would be coming up with, our ideas would slowly start to feel more and more similar to the last stuff because we're going through the same process. And
let's just touch upon I don't know how to term it. Is it 3 principles? This is something you covered in your talk.
Right. When we're working with clients, and we're trying to persuade them that, all this stuff that I've talked about today, that's about, is it so important for you as a client that your brand and your identity feel different? They're not just going to take our word for it. Sometimes they do. But sometimes we need to like really strongly argue our case. And what's really helpful, what we find really helpful is to give them some sort of tangible, proven psychological effects. And there's 3 that we find quite helpful, that I think quite powerful. The first one is the von Restorff effect, which is this psychological effect that was discovered in the 1930s by this lady called Hedwig von Restorff. And basically what she proved, and this kind of sounds obvious, but it's very powerful, is that if someone is presented with a set of things, say it might be words, they are more likely to remember the word that's different. And so I'll give you an example, like in a list of that goes something like, I don't know, chair, stool, table, chipmunk, armchair, like you're all remembering one word right now, and it probably isn't stool, it's chipmunk, right? And that's because that's the word that's different, and that applies across everything. Visual, verbal, like people remember stuff that's different. And so when you think about that, like the power of difference is so important. If you're creating a brand, you want to create a brand that's memorable, create something that's different. See if I can remember them. So there's another one called the mere exposure effect, which is really interesting, which is basically, I think when we all see stuff for the first time, see something new and fresh, different for the first time, often as like human beings are hardwired to like react quite negatively to it. And I think that comes from like ancient times of like running away from threats and things. If something unfamiliar, you don't want to, you got to be careful. And so if you're creating something different, we've all seen, creative work that's put up on the internet that people slam because it feels different or it feels uncomfortable. But what tends to happen, and this is a proven psychological effect, is that over time, you start to like it more. The more you see something, the more you like it. And so if you think about all these famous logos and brands and things that maybe got a horrible reception when they were launched, whether it is, I always talk about the London 2012 Wolf Ollins London Olympics logo. They got this horrible reaction when it launched, including from me. But now, like you look back on it, and people think that's one of the best pieces of best branding scheme like of all time. It's a classic, and that's because you get more familiar with it and you start to like it more as you do. And then so that's the mere exposure effect. And then the third one is called the red sneaker effect. And basically the idea with the red sneaker effect, and I need to get some red sneakers to prove this for you. The white ones, I'm going to work on this. But basically, if you do something differently, like you show up on stage and you're wearing red sneakers or something like that, people infer that because you're doing that thing differently to what's expected, they infer status on you. They just assume that you've got the right to do that, and so they value your opinion more highly than if you're dressed the same as everybody else. And that's the same. That works the same with branding and things. So something that's different, not only do people more likely to remember it because of the von Restorff effect, but also they're more likely to value it more highly because of what's called the red sneaker effect, which has been like tested as well. There's some nuances to it, but basically, something that's different gets valued more highly than something that looks the same as everything else.
It's brilliant. I love it. I love learning about stuff like that, the psychology behind it all, and it's utterly fascinating, but really not that complex. Like you say, you hear it and you go, yeah, I kind of knew that, and I've always behaved as such. But to hear it explained and see the origin of it is fascinating. I imagine we're coming in pretty close to time. This has been really, really good. I guess to sign off, we've probably covered a lot of them, but are there any sort of, as somebody who invariably will recruit new talent in the industry, is there something, are there any points of encouragement, pieces of advice, things, whether it be a portfolio, an attitude, a character, what would you pass on to this audience of people who are looking to get into our industry today?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's have confidence in yourself and in what makes you different. Like whatever makes you different makes you more valuable in a creative industry, in a creative agency, or whatever you want to go on and do. And sometimes it's easy to think, oh my God, this thing that I do, or this way that I look, or this way that I work is different, and so no company is going to value that. But actually, what we are all looking for is that thing. So that thing that makes you different is the thing that makes you really, really valuable in this industry. And I really want everybody here, if you don't remember anything else, I guess, like, please just come away with that. Come away with that confidence to be yourself. Come away with that confidence to express yourself. Come away with that confidence to put your head above the parapet. Be different. Embrace that, because that is the thing that has the real power right now. And I think in all the like technological advances, AI and everything else, that is the thing that's going to carry you forward. And so please embrace that.
Yeah, just to echo that, the tools will come and go. They always have done, they always will. But what's been here with us since the dawn of time is storytelling and human emotion and you know, that's what elevates us above merely surviving, and that is what makes this industry you know, so magic. Well, thank you all very much for listening. I do the podcast weekly, The Creative Condition. It's free on Spotify and all that stuff, so go and have a listen. There's boatloads of these conversations, so I hope it's of some help, and get in touch. And thank you for coming.